Among the contributions of Brené Brown's research, none has been as practically useful as the sharp distinction she draws between shame and guilt. In everyday speech, the two words are often used interchangeably. In her work, they are two fundamentally different experiences with opposite consequences. Confusing them leads to misery. Distinguishing them is the beginning of healing. Guilt, in Brown's framework, is the feeling I did something bad. It is focused on a specific action. It contains an implicit possibility of repair. If guilt is functioning correctly, it produces a sequence: recognition of harm, acknowledgement, apology, repair, integration of the lesson, moving on. The feeling is uncomfortable, but it has a use. It is the signal that you have violated your own values, and it motivates you to align future behavior with those values. Shame is the feeling I am bad. It is focused not on what you did, but on what you are. It contains no possibility of repair, because the problem is not in any specific action. The problem is in your existence. If you are bad as a person, no apology will fix it. No different choice next time will fix it. The badness is constitutive. It is who you are. Brown's research shows that these two feelings have radically different consequences. Guilt is associated with constructive responses: apologizing, making amends, behavior change. People who experience guilt without shame tend to learn from mistakes, repair relationships, and grow over time. Shame is associated with the opposite: defensiveness, withdrawal, denial, attacking others, blaming, addiction, depression. People who experience shame frequently and have not learned to navigate it tend to repeat the very behaviors that made them feel ashamed. The shame produces the conditions for more shame. The mechanism is not mysterious. If you feel guilty about something you did, you can address what you did. If you feel ashamed of who you are, addressing it requires you to do the impossible: become someone else. Most people, faced with this impossibility, hide. They hide from themselves and from others. They develop strategies to never feel the shame, which usually means avoiding situations where they might fail or be seen clearly. The hiding ensures that the underlying issue is never examined, which ensures that the shame never resolves. Brown found in her interviews that everyone has shame. Shame is universal. What varies is what we are ashamed of and how we relate to it. Common shame triggers in her research clustered around appearance, money, work, parenting, sexuality, addiction, family of origin, mental health, trauma, religion, and aging. The specific content differed across people. The pattern of hiding, of feeling unworthy of connection because of what one was, did not. The way out of shame, in Brown's framework, was counterintuitive. You could not argue with shame. You could not solve it by trying hard to become better. You could not eliminate it through achievement, because achievement was usually deployed as a defense against the underlying shame and never actually addressed it. What worked was talking. Specifically, telling someone trustworthy about the shame. Brown emphasizes that this is not the same as oversharing or random confession. The other person has to be capable of holding what you share, without judging, without minimizing, without trying to fix it, without making it about themselves. Not everyone qualifies. Choosing the right person is part of the skill. When the conditions are right and the shame is named to someone who can receive it, something often happens that Brown documented across hundreds of interviews. The shame loses much of its grip. It does not disappear, but it stops controlling behavior. The person realizes that the thing they had been hiding was not the cause of unworthiness they had imagined. They realize that the other person, hearing the truth, did not withdraw. They realize that maybe the assumption that everyone would reject them if they knew was not actually true. This finding is consistent with what therapists have long understood about shame. Shame thrives in secrecy. It dissipates in compassionate witness. The witness does not have to fix anything. The witness just has to receive what is being shared without rejection. The reception itself does the work. The practical implications are large. People often try to cure shame through achievement, through perfectionism, through pleasing others. None of these work. The shame is still there, just harder to see. What works is much harder than any of those strategies. It requires acknowledging the shame to oneself, then choosing to share it with someone who has earned the right to hear it. This is uncomfortable in ways the achievement strategies never are. The discomfort is what marks it as the real work. Brown also distinguishes shame from healthy guilt as a parental and pedagogical matter. Children who grow up with shame-based parenting, where mistakes are framed as evidence of being a bad child, internalize a different relationship to error than children who grow up with guilt-based feedback, where mistakes are framed as actions to be repaired. The first group tends toward defensive armor and avoidance. The second tends toward responsibility and growth. The difference is largely in the language adults use around imperfection. This applies in workplaces too. Managers who shame employees for mistakes produce employees who hide mistakes, which produces worse outcomes. Managers who hold employees accountable for actions while not implying anything about their worth produce employees who acknowledge errors and learn from them. The distinction is concrete. You messed up versus you are a mess up. The first is workable. The second is corrosive. Brown notes that the distinction is harder to maintain in real time than it sounds in the abstract. Under stress, parents fall into shame-based language. Under criticism, managers reach for personality-attacking comments. The cultural defaults push toward shame. Maintaining the guilt-not-shame distinction requires deliberate practice, especially in moments of frustration. What the work offers, at minimum, is a vocabulary. Once you can name the difference between guilt and shame, you can notice which one is operating in you and in others. You can choose to address actual actions rather than perceive character. You can resist the slide into the global judgment that defines shame. And when you encounter your own shame, and you will, you have the framework that makes it visible, which is the beginning of being able to do something with it. Brown's contribution was to make this distinction usable for ordinary people, not just for therapists. The vocabulary is in wider circulation because of her work. The lives it has changed are many. The change starts with seeing the difference.